Today we're going to take a look at this procedural flagstone texture. It's probably a little bit more complicated than some of my other videos, but I kind of wanted to go more in depth with this one. There's a lot of stuff you can customize, you know, the thickness of the grout, the color of the rocks, and that noise texture on the surface, to name a few. To start off, let's go ahead and size our cube by a factor of 0.2 on the z-axis. Then go ahead and hit Control A and apply that scale. We're going to come over here to the right and go to the modifiers panel and turn on a bevel modifier and change the segments to 5 there. And then either right click or hit W to bring up the submenu and go to Shade Smooth. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the top right here my 3D viewport, and I'm going to make this whole middle screen my shader editor, just like this. And I'm going to hit N to get rid of that shelf on the right. I'm also going to quickly just scroll across the top here and turn off these gizmos just so we have a little bit more visibility here in the top right there. We can see our object a bit better. That looks way better there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up a Voronoi pattern here to kind of be the base of our flagstone pattern there. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in a Voronoi texture here and just leave it on F1 and Euclidean. And I'm going to make sure this is highlighted and hit Control T, and that's going to bring up a texture coordinate and mapping node, and just make sure this is coming out of object instead of generated. Now what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this Voronoi and plug vector into vector down here, but we're going to change this type. We're going to change it to distance to edge, just like this here. And let's take a look at what either one of these looks like. I'm going to turn on rendered mode here so we can see the Voronoi pattern here. Then we can see the distance to edge here. They look quite different. What we actually want to do is actually look at the color there and the distance to edge, and those actually look really similar. So that's what we want, the color output right there. Then what we're going to do is we're going to just add a noise texture onto this vector line here and bring in a mix RGB so we can control how much influence that noise texture has by plugging the color into the top and then the object directly into color 2. And I'm going to set the scale to 2, just like this here, and set this factor to 0.85 there, just like that. Okay, so basically this top Voronoi texture here with all the colors is going to allow us to make each stone a different color if we want, and that's really useful. This bottom Voronoi texture is going to allow us to control just the stuff in between the rocks, you know, the grout or whatever you want to call it. And I want these two values to be synced up. You know, if I change the scale here, I want this scale down here to also change. So to do that, I'm just going to create two value nodes here. And this top one, I'm going to plug into the scale inputs of each of these Voronois. And this bottom one, I'm going to plug into the randomness of each of these Voronois. This top value, I'm going to set to 1.7. And this bottom one, I'm going to set to 0.8, just like that. It's way more convenient. You know, this way if we adjust this, both change, you know, at the same time and sync up. So if we want to make any adjustments, we don't have to adjust several parameters at once. Let's set up a control for the thickness of the grout there. I'm going to bring in a color ramp to do that and just place it right after this bottom Voronoi texture, which is the distance to edge one. I'm going to change this type to constant and just change this top value to 0.02, just like that. So now we can see these black lines there. If we wanted to adjust this here, we could change the thickness of that grout. You know, you could do whatever you want, but I'm just going to set mine to 0.02. That looks pretty good for now. So the second thing I'm going to set up is just an interesting kind of musgrave texture here that just creates an interesting texture on top of the rocks. So I'm just going to bring it in, leave it at FBM, and change the scale to 3, the detail to 10, the dimension to 0.1, and I'm just going to leave the linearity at 2, just like that. I'm going to hit Control T, bring up this texture coordinate and mapping node, make sure this is coming out of object. Then I'm going to do the same thing as I did before, where I just put a noise texture on the vector line and put a mix RGB in here just to control the influence of that noise texture. So just plug this guy into the bottom there. I'm going to set this noise texture to 2 and change this factor to 0.8. So let's see what that's doing here. It's just kind of creating this swirling texture, just kind of a noise texture here. So it looks kind of interesting. I like the look of that here. Let's go ahead and bring in a color ramp and just control the levels here a little bit more. And we're going to basically set the white value at 0.9 and the black value is actually going to be at 1, just like that. So this is what we have in the top right so far. So next up, I want to create kind of an interesting noise texture just to influence the bump of the rocks so that they're not completely flat. So I'm going to bring in a noise texture here. Let's just zoom in a little bit here and set this to 20 and not adjust any of the other things, and just duplicate it and set this one to 10, just like that. Then we're going to go ahead and highlight the top one, hit Control T, bring up a texture coordinate and mapping node, make sure this is coming out of object. And we're going to bring in another noise texture on the vector line here, and a mix RGB so we can control the influence just like this. Let's go ahead and set this noise texture to something pretty high. I'm going to click on this one here so we can see what we're doing while we're working on this as well. So we can see it's just kind of, just a little bit swirly there. We're going to create an interesting bump here. So this factor, we're going to set this to 0.9, just like that. So it's not as much of an influence there. And then we're going to come over to this noise texture here. Make sure this is plugged into vector as well from that mapping. So we can see this one is, a little bit less interesting. This one's got a bit more detail to it there. So we're going to put a color ramp right after this bottom one here. Just feed that into here, just like that. And for this value here, the black, we're going to change this to 0.41, and the white is going to go to 0.44, just like this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a mix RGB and just place it here, and this color ramp is going to go into the factor, and this noise texture is going to go into color 1. So if we look and see what this is doing here, just wait for it to load in there for a second. We can see now that it's just kind of creating these divots here. This factor here, we can control this more or less divots. You can set this however you want. It's just how I had it set up. I like the look of this amount of divots here. So now let's go ahead and set up a color ramp right after this mix RGB here. And we're going to change the black to 0.26, just like this. We're going to bring the white down to 0.6, and we're going to change this value a little bit. Basically, right here where it says value, we're going to change this to 0.2, just like that. So it's kind of a gray color. This is what it looks like up in the top right there. So far we've got this set up right here, which is the Voronoi, and then we've got this one down here, which is the noise, and then we've got this one here, which is the Musgrave. And we're going to do one more quick little setup that's basically going to be the detail for the grout in between the rocks there. We could just leave it as like a solid color, but this just adds a little bit more complexity, which is nice. I'm going to bring in a noise texture and not worry about a texture coordinate and mapping node this time here, but I am going to pump up the scale to 200 there. I'm going to bring in a color ramp and just put it right afterwards. We're going to plug the color into the factor there, and what we're going to do is we're going to bring the black up to 0.36 and bring the white down to 0.38, just like that. We're going to bring in one more color ramp afterwards. We're going to plug the color into the factor there, and what we're going to do here is we're going to bring the white to 0.36, just like that, and then kind of lost the black there. If they're ever right on top of each other and you can't select one, you can use this right here to change between the two of them. But I'm going to set the black there to 1. Just bring it all the way to the top. It's the wrong one. Grab the black. Oh my god. Okay, I'm just going to grab the black first and then move the white back to 0.36 here. Then we're going to adjust the black here. Again, the value is going to be at 0.85, just like this here. So it's actually quite close to white. It's like a light gray, just like that there. Then we're going to run this into a principled BSDF here and just plug that right in there. Let's see what this looks like. It should just be kind of a spotted kind of thing. Yeah, so we got some white flecks in a sea of gray. So I'm going to add one more color ramp in here. And by the way, just make sure this one is set on ease. I think I did that one off camera. Just set that one on ease. So let's bring in another color ramp here and set this to ease as well and plug this factor into factor. And we're going to leave these two sliders where they are, but we're going to adjust this bottom value. Just change this value to 0.55. So it's kind of a middle gray there, just like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to mix this color ramp here with this Voronoi texture right here. So go ahead and do that. Make sure it's just a mix like that. And make sure this is coming out of color as well. We want it to be coming out of color rather than distance. Then what we're going to do is we're going to mix this color ramp down here that's coming out of the noise texture with this color ramp right here. So let's go ahead and set that up there, just like this. We're going to set this mix right here to 0.95. And then what we're going to do is we're going to mix this mix right here with this color ramp down here as well. So let's go ahead and set that up there, just like that. And looked like something happened there. Why is that? Yeah, that shouldn't be going there. Let's go ahead and just plug this color ramp back into here. And let's set this factor right here to 0.875. So this might have been a little confusing. Just take a second to look at my setup here and just make sure yours looks like this as well. So we've got this color ramp right here going into the top of that mix, and this Voronoi going into the bottom out of the color. Then that goes into this mix right here, and this color ramp here goes into the bottom of both of these mixes right here, and this color ramp goes into the top of this mix right here. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing, but let's move on to the next step here. So this color ramp right here, or pardon me, this mix RGB right here, let's take a look at this for a second, because this is going to be eventually our color. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a couple color ramps here. I'm just going to set up one simple one at first, and this is just going to be, this bottom value is at 0.04, and this top value is going to be at 0.2. This top value is going to remain white, and this bottom value, put that back to 0.04, this bottom value is going to be 0.3 with the value, so kind of a dark gray color, just like that. Then we're going to bring in another color ramp here to actually set up our colors here. So I'm going to set up a couple points here. This bottom one is going to be at 0, and this top one is going to be at 1. So I'm going to set up 3 colors in the middle. Let's go ahead and just add those in, and we'll just move them to the spot. So there we go, we got 3. This second one is going to be at 0.26. This third one is going to be at 0.33. And then this fourth one is going to be at 0.67, just like that. So for these colors here, again, you can set them however you want here, but I'm just going to show you the colors that I set up. So for this bottom one, I'm going to set the value to 0.15, make it kind of a dark gray. And this second one here, I'm actually going to go through all 3 hue, saturation, and value with hue here. So 0.03 for the hue, 0.07 for the saturation, and then 0.54 for the value. So it's very close to gray, but it just kind of got a little bit of brown in it there. Then this third color here, let's again do hue at 1, or 0.1, pardon me. And then the saturation is going to be 0.15, and then the value is going to be 0.54, just like that. So kind of a little bit more brown, but again, you know, mostly gray. Then this third one here is just going to be gray at 0.735. Mine's set up like that automatically, but if yours isn't, just change this value to 0.735 there. Then we're going to bring this principled BDSF up here. We're going to plug this right into the color, just like this. So we can kind of see what our color looks like here with the stones, you know, just so far. Let's go ahead and add in our grout now, and to do that we're going to bring in a mix shader and just put it right here after this principled BSDF, and we're actually going to plug this one into the bottom socket, I believe. I might change that if it's wrong, but I think that's right there. So then this principled right here that we used to create the grout texture, we're going to plug this into the top of that mix shader there. And then way back here we had this Voronoi with the distance to edge going into this color ramp that was set to constant, and that's going to be our factor. So let's go ahead and plug that into the factor of this mix shader, just like that there. Now we should see our grout in the middle and then our rocks there. Yeah, great, right on. So we can see if we zoom in here as well, we get those little flecks there. Yeah, you know, that's just what I wanted. You can do whatever you want, but I just wanted the grout to be lighter than the rocks there. So next up, let's take a look at this mix RGB that we set up right here. This is actually going to be our roughness, but I want to run it through one more color ramp before we plug it into our principled BDSF there, because it's just going to be a little bit too shiny, I think. So just make it a bit more rough here. The way to do that is I'm just going to set this to constant, and I'm going to bring this white down at the top to 0.03, just like that, really close to the bottom. Then I'm going to change this black color to a 0.7 gray, just like this. So it's quite white there. So let's just see what that roughness map looks like for a second here. Yeah, there we go. It's basically mostly white, so quite close to 1, so quite rough. So let's plug this right into the roughness on the principled BSDF there. So we're actually getting quite close to being done here. Hopefully you're not too confused at this point. I may have gone a little fast in some parts, but it is a longer tutorial, so I didn't want to drag it too much. But we're going to set up 2 bump nodes and a displacement node, just like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to plug this color ramp down here into this first displacement node, just into the height there. And we're going to adjust this strength to 0.1, just like that. Then we're going to plug this normal into the normal right here. And we're going to plug this color ramp right here into the height on this second bump node. We're going to bring the strength to 0.7 here. So let's just see what this looks like so far, our bump information. So we can see we got some bump information for the grout that's a bit stronger, and then the more subtle effect just with this noise texture right here just creates some interesting texture along the rocks there. So this next part here is a little subtle. You know, you don't really have to do this, but it does make a little bit of a difference. I'm just going to take this color ramp here and plug it in to the height on this displacement node. Now what we're going to do is we're going to set this mid-level to 0 and bring the scale down to 0.1, and then plug this displacement right into the displacement on the material output, just like that. Let's take a look at what this looks like here from our mix shader. There we go. Yeah, it takes a little while to load in. The last thing we need to do is just connect this bump to the normal on our principled BSDF there. There we go. Yeah, that's it. We're all done. So let's just look at a couple ways you could change this around. The first most obvious way to me is just change this color ramp here. We can change the thickness of this grout here. You know, it's kind of interesting. Do that however we want. We could also change the value on this top value node here. Just make this a larger or smaller Voronoi pattern there. Same with this one right here. Make it less random, more random, you know, whatever. We could also change this factor right here. Make it, I don't really like the look of that. It doesn't look very realistic, but you could change that around if you wanted. You could change a whole bunch of stuff around here and just really customize this shader. So hopefully that was straightforward, and hope you can see how you would change this around and make it you know, your own unique creation. Thanks a lot for watching.